Hello, I'm Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance out of Chicago. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We're an advocacy organization powered by our members, people like you who want fast, frequent, and affordable trains across the country. We do three categories of work. We do research to understand what best practices are in this very unique North American environment. We educate people through a variety of forums like webinars, in-person meetings at Rotary clubs, etc., meetings with policymakers, etc. And we provide tools that you can use in order to influence the process and help get fast trains moving in this country. I had the opportunity to visit Salt Lake City, to go to the Stadler factory, etc., on a way back from a great meeting in Montana, and was really looking forward to seeing the train station in Salt Lake City. They've got two of them, two beautiful train stations, but neither of them has trains. The trains are kind of stuck behind another development in a little shack. I was really excited to learn about a community-led effort to take that old right-of-way where the trains used to be and dig a trench under the road and put the trains back in. So I was really excited to run into this group and the activities that they're doing. And I will allow Chris Ott, our Deputy Director out of Madison, to give the introduction and give a little run of how this show works, and look forward to a great presentation.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks everyone for being here. And in terms of how the show works today, when we get underway, please use, if you have questions, please use Zoom's Q&A feature. It helps to have them all there in one place. And if you have questions or want to discuss this with other people in the audience, use the chat instead for that. So Q&A for questions, chat for everything else. For our talk today, I'm excited about it for a couple of reasons. One of which is that this came about thanks to an Alliance supporter. We gave a talk, some of you maybe attended a talk that we did a couple of months back on our our vision for Chicago called Crossrail Chicago. And a member of the audience, Frederick Jenny, and I had a little correspondence after that, and he eventually suggested the topic that we are having a presentation on today, the Rio Grande Plan, and he introduced us to the speaker, Christian Lenhart. And so, you know, if you have ideas for topics or speakers, please let us know. We'd be interested to hear those. And when Rick and I met with Christian Lenhart to talk about this idea, we were just really impressed by the receptive or the positive reception that their effort got from local officials. So we'll be hearing more about that from Christian Lenhart. And let me give the official introduction now. Christian Lenhart is a professional civil engineer working on local transportation projects. He has contributed to projects such as the Utah Transit Authority's UVX and OGX bus rapid transit lines in Provo and Ogden, as well as the Mountain View Corridor and the future West Davis Corridor. A graduate of Brigham Young University, he brings work experience from other industries such as the Utah Transit Authority and the Walt Disney Company. He currently lives in Salt Lake City and is a daily commuter on TRAX, the city's light rail system. We must be the change we want to see in the world. So it's great to see, you know, people using the transit options that are out there. So with that, let me turn things over to Christian Lenhart.
All right, yes. Hello, I'm Christian Lenhart from Salt Lake City, and I am one of the original authors of the Rio Grande Plan, which I will share my screen and talk about now. All right, so the Rio Grande Plan is a community-led effort. We've received a lot of attention in the local news media and a better reception from local planners and politicians who would like to see this as a way to better represent Salt Lake City than our transit options currently show. So a little bit about Salt Lake City. It's the capital of the state of Utah, and Utah is by far and away almost entirely desert and sparsely populated, except along this mountain range right here. This is the Wasatch Range. It's just tall enough to pull down enough rain and snow to make this a very habitable and fun place to live. This stretch here, about 120 miles long, between Ogden and Provo, is called the Wasatch Front, and it's where a majority of the population of Utah lives. In fact, about 90% of the population of the state lives on this front. It's about 10% of the land area. So by that metric, Utah is strangely one of the most urban states in the country. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the country as well. The city is expected to double in size within the next 40 or 50 years. And because everyone lives along this very narrow and very short segment, it's a very consolidated population area. Salt Lake City is the capital both politically and socially, even economically, which makes it a bit of an outlier compared to a lot of metro areas in the United States. It's about 2.5 million people who live here, but so it's not especially a large city, but because it is arranged basically in a nice long line, it makes transit a much more practical solution for our population than maybe in other cities and metro areas around the country. The first modern transit, as far as rail goes, and high capacity transit, was the TRAX light rail line that opened in 1999 along a former freight corridor. That's the blue line on this map. And that's been extended 8 times in the last 15 years. It's been about 10 years since anything new opened on it, but it still is growing in ridership. On both ends of the Wasatch Front, Ogden and Provo, there's new bus rapid transit lines where buses have their own corridors and often have higher ridership than some of the TRAX lines. This is my favorite station, BYU South Campus in Provo. It's the station that I had the most input on the design of. And yeah, it's helping build a culture of transit riders here. But the big story is, of course, the commuter rail line, which is we call FrontRunner along the Wasatch Front. And this is, again, a little unique as far as commuter rail lines go, because the freight lines through Utah are very well used. Union Pacific was able to negotiate a deal where they would sell right-of-way along the side of the freight tracks so that UTA, the Utah Transit Authority, could build their own tracks next to the freight ones. So the commuter rail lines, the commuter rail trains and the freight trains never interfere with each other. And this allows UTA to run, frankly, a ridiculous amount of trains. There's about 25 to 28 round trips per day, depending on a few things. And it takes about an hour, both going north or south, to reach the end of the line. Trains move about 80 miles per hour. And ridership has been extremely responsive, breaking the expectations. Pre-COVID, there's about 17,000 daily boardings on FrontRunner, which put it pretty close to the top 10 nationwide, ahead of other cities like Dallas or Seattle, where there's a much bigger market or potential. And they're not done improving the FrontRunner either. There's newer, the upcoming expansion project that's supposed to be completed before 2029 is going to double track more of the line. That's the fatal flaw of the system at the moment, is that it's mostly a single track with trains going both directions on the single line. The new project aims to increase the frequency of the trains by doubling the amount of double track. So it'll be about half double track by the time this is done. There's potential to increase the top speed as well. The line is currently designed for 90 miles per hour, but there's some talk about moving that up to perhaps 110 miles per hour as newer trains are purchased and other improvements like electrification is added. And that's been discussed at the state level in the state House of Representatives. But the current plan is to add more trains faster than they're adding tracks. So travel times are going to increase for a little bit. And well, there's thoughts on that. But the idea is that with double the amount of trains, you'll essentially double the amount of ridership. So before the pandemic, UTA was looking at 17,000 daily boardings. We aren't there anymore. Hopefully we'll get back to that. But by the time 2030 rolls around, we'll have about 30,000 daily boardings on the commuter rail line, which puts us in some very good company. All the commuter rail lines ahead of us in terms of ridership have very large central stations to handle this passenger demand. In Salt Lake City, we have this, which is the intermodal hub. And on paper, it looks like it should be a pretty good idea. You've got two kinds of rail modes interacting. You've got intercity and transit buses. And that small shack in the center with the blue trim, that's the Amtrak station. It serves the two daily trains, well, nightly trains rather. But as you can see, there's no station building. There's no real facilities here for people who are waiting. And let me pull out here. You can see the transit stations in the up, it's the left, it's that triangle parcel about 11 o'clock. And the downtown is off to the right there. And you can see already that it's a really far distance from downtown. There's just not a lot built up around it. It's hidden away under the freeway bridges. It's hard for people to get to, and it's just not a good area of town. When people arrive in Salt Lake City, they spend as little time as they possibly can at this train station, and they board their bus or their train and gets to where they're going. And that's kind of sad. It didn't always used to be this way. Salt Lake City has two historic train stations. The one on the left is probably the more visible one. It's the Union Pacific Depot. It's closer to downtown. But as you can see, it's being turned into a hotel, which not a bad use, I guess. The Rio Grande Depot on the right is the other building, historic train station, and it's better positioned as far as the rail network is concerned. There's a lot more flexibility in train operations at the Rio Grande Depot. This was built in 1910. It's been a city icon for 113 years now, and it's got an amazing history to how it was built and survived through a whole century of economic development and changes. They just don't build station buildings like this anymore. In fact, if you go back and read the archives, there's a lot of concern in the correspondence between the architect and the railroad company that they shouldn't have built it this big to begin with. But we're very fortunate to have it. At the moment, though, the State Historical Society, which has operated this station building for the last 50 years, since it was purchased in 1977, they're looking to partially or even maybe completely move to a new building that's being built on Capitol Hill. And there's a lot of uncertainty about what this building is going to be used for in the future. And the reason that it's not used currently is that the railroad tracks to reach this depot were, built right down the middle of the streets, a remnant of the Wild West days when trains and cars shared a lot more space together. And obviously that was not a sustainable situation. So in preparation for the 2002 Winter Olympics, when the city was rebuilding itself and getting ready for the limelight, they moved the trains further west to the consolidated freight corridor closer to the freeway. And there's been plans ever since to upgrade that temporary facility into something better. The most recent plans are in the top left. You can see UTA wants to build a headquarters building there. But there's some skepticism about this plan. UTA in the past has had to pay for a lot of transit expansion on its own, including the FrontRunner system, which I talked about. They took out several bonds and have been using a lot of money that used to go for transit operations into paying off the debt for the trains. And the bus network had to be cut down to size to match the lower budgets that were created by paying off all this debt for rail expansion. And generally the public was not happy with the way the money was spent. There was an effort a few years ago to even rebrand the UTA to something else to give it a fresh start, since public opinion has been so low. And so basically the UTA does not have a lot of freedom to go about exploring large expansions for even little things like building amenities at its central station. But even if you do build amenities at the central station, it doesn't really solve the fundamental issues, that it's far away from downtown, it's in an unpleasant neighborhood, and that the trains, in order to reach this depot, need to cross through many railroad crossings. These are extremely unpopular in the city. Lots of times freight trains block these crossings and say stopped at these crossings because the freight yards are not so far away. Just a few years ago, the average length of a Union Pacific freight train stretched past a mile. I think it's over 7,000 feet for the average freight train now. And as traffic continues to increase and railroad operations change, these trains just get longer and longer and block more crossings, which isn't helped by UTA running fast commuter trains through here. If they want to double the frequency, you'd have upwards of 100 commuter trains a day going through these crossings that people consider a huge division in the community. And every year since we started pitching the Rio Grande Plan in 2020, there's been fatalities at these crossings, and it's drawn a lot of attention to this infrastructure through the middle of the urban core of the city being so dangerous. So this is the situation that I walked into as a graduating college student. My claim to fame is that as a college student, I was a train host for UTA. They don't have the traditional engineer and conductor. They have an operator and a train host to help passengers in the passenger compartments. And my claim to fame is that I was one of the first commuters on the South Line to Provo when that first opened, because I had to report for duty in Salt Lake City, but I got to board the test trains. And if you've never been able to commute on your own private commuter train before, I highly recommend it. It's pretty fun. But seeing how the system opened and how the new passengers reacted to arriving in Salt Lake City at this, it's essentially a freight yard on the outskirts of town, and their disappointment at not being where they needed to go, it got me thinking for many years about how this could be improved. So as I continued on in my engineering career, doing transit lines and highway expansions, what could we do to better improve the commuter rail system? And as I talked with my friends online and other enthusiasts, we came up with an idea that became known as the Rio Grande Plan. What this is essentially is that you would put the tracks back where they used to go. Instead of going down the middle of the street, Wild West style, we put them below the street in this thing that we're calling a train box. Engineering, we would definitely call it a trench, but we've been counseled for publicity reasons not to call it a tunnel or a trench, but a train box, which is a much friendlier term. And the idea is the same. You hollow out a space in the ground, and then you put essentially a parking deck or a road deck on the top, so that you can have trains and cars share the same space horizontally, but vertically, they're completely separate. And this would close a lot of the dangerous railroad crossings, and it would allow trains to return to the Rio Grande Depot, which would become the new transportation hub. You can see in this rendering that there is bus plazas on the north and south end. There's room for ride shares on the road. The road is called 500 West. The trains would be below grade here. You would get to the platforms on escalators and elevators or even stairs. And on the other side of the depot would be the light rail connection, so that you could rise up on the stairs or elevator, go through the historic depot, a real welcome to Salt Lake City, and then get where you need to go. And because it's a block and a half closer, and because Salt Lake City has literally the biggest blocks of any major city in the United States, it's a big deal. It's moving about a quarter or a half mile closer to where people need to go. So in this case, a lot of people wouldn't even need to board another train or bus. You can just walk to your final destination. And if that sounds expensive to you, well, you're exactly right. That's a really expensive proposition. But we were able to close the loop on that by moving all the trains to this train box below 500 West Street. We could remove the tracks and the mostly disused freight yards on the west side of town, and then take all that land that was formerly occupied by the train yards and use that to develop, and the money from that development to help pay for the initial cost of the project. The very elements that make the neighborhood so undesirable, the railroad crossings, the freight yards, the huge highway overpasses to get over these freight yards, we can eliminate all of that. It can be gone. Not a problem anymore for anyone. And that would make it a much more attractive place to build and develop a whole new area of downtown, which at the moment, is suffering from a housing shortage. You can really address a lot of major problems with just this one redevelopment. And you'll notice we have some good renderings to show here. This is entirely the work of my friend Cameron Blakely, who is an urban designer and was able to bring his considerable skill to visualize how the plan works. He made a few of these. And one of the really cool things about what he did is that he used a design language that people are already very familiar with. This here is the North Temple Station, where the airport tracks line interfaces with the FrontRunner. You can go down the bridge there. And that covered canopy is another very distinguishing feature of the transit line that people are familiar with. And he designed the canopy over the tracks, the glass roof there, to be reminiscent of that. So it looks like it just fits. It has a look already of something that is very plausible, even though what we're proposing is a huge step change increase in the kind of infrastructure that transit has had in the past here in Utah. So after creating these renderings and in our arguments, putting them in text, Cameron and I created this booklet, and you can still download it. It's the main feature of our website, Rio Grande Plan, saltlakecity.org. And we began sending these in print and in PDF form to everyone we could think of, to senators, to state representatives, to the newspapers. We just wanted to get this out, that there's this potential here, and we kind of expected this to not go anywhere, be just a remnant, a sort of footnote of this is how things could have been. But we started to get picked up. The first person to notice this and really give it a platform was Luke Garrett. He has a news and development website called Building Salt Lake. And he was a very enthusiastic and early supporter of the plan. He spent several articles going over the history of the area of the two railroad stations and why this was a thing that Salt Lake City should look very seriously at. And the next step, as far as people taking notice of us, was Nick Norris. He is the director of planning at Salt Lake City. And he has actually a very active public presence on X and on Reddit. At the time it was X was Twitter, and we corresponded with him. And this was during the tail end of the COVID situation, so it was easy to have a Zoom meeting over the lunch hour and just show him our renderings of what this could be and how this could solve a lot of the major issues that's holding transit back. And he became such a supporter of the idea that he was able to arrange a presentation for us in front of the Salt Lake City Council. And they were intrigued. They asked for another sessions to ask more questions. And eventually, two of the council members in particular, eventually all of the council members showed support in some way or another, but two in particular, Dan Dugan and Alejandro Poy, became big supporters and were able to use some city funds to help promote the idea of the train box of the Rio Grande Plan. This culminated in January of this year, where we were able to put on a public event and see what the actual public support is. We held this in a food hall that's was formerly a warehouse downtown. And you can see there's a bunch of presenters up front. There's Alejandro going left to right, Alejandro, then there's me, and then there's Matt Givens and Cameron Blakely and Nick Norris. And then on the right in orange, there's Clark Cahoon and their city staffer who was instrumental in getting this done. And we presented this plan and showed to the city what it is. And we were amazed by the reception. The news crews came out. The public came. There was nearly 200 people in the food hall. And the publicity that came from this was more than we expected. We really struck a nerve here. And the thing that surprised me the most was that our support from the city council and from the community wasn't about trains as I expected it to be. You know, being the engineer, I went over for the longest time trying to say how much more efficient this is, how we're reducing the risk of collisions, and how we're building capacity for the trains. But the thing that interested most people was removing the railroad crossings, was filling in this empty space. In Salt Lake City, the railroad tracks, when they first arrived since 1870, it's been 150 years of essentially division of east and west side, and people, it's become a very acute issue in city politics, the divide between east and west. And people are really looking to this plan as a way to heal that divide, because the solution is not mitigating railroad crossings. It's not adding some safety feature to the railroad crossings. It's a complete elimination of what was formerly a huge barrier. And it's the potential to heal that divide is what's drawing the most attention. So much attention, in fact, that Salt Lake City applied for a federal grant to better study the issue. The first grant application didn't succeed, but they tried again, which really amazed me at the commitments they showed. And in February of this year, we won from the Department of Transportation a grant called Connecting Communities, which is a new initiative from the Biden administration to correct infrastructure mistakes, to make improvements to the infrastructure that also improve the community. And I think this project, it fits the bill exactly to a T. And so we won about $2 million, or the city did, won $2 million to better look at how burying the train tracks, as we're describing it, can be used to further the community. Which, I just have to say again, hats off and my admiration to the current Salt Lake City mayor and the city council and the planning staff for really pushing this forward. And just a few weeks ago, I was informed of another effort that the city had made. This one without my knowledge. They had used city funds to actually come up with a very high-level feasibility study. They contracted another engineering firm to basically double-check the work that Cameron and I had put out. And we're still processing the results. The city, or this private consultant, was able to discuss in closed-door meetings with the freight railroads, with the transit agency, with local stakeholders and property owners, what actually it would take to make this the trench or train box idea feasible. And the good news that I am going to share is that the findings are that the plan is feasible. They used a configuration that's slightly different than what we, Cameron and I, originally proposed, but it's not so far different. Our next steps, we think, as our supporters group, the Friends of the Rio Grande Depot is what we're going to be calling ourselves. Our next step is to hold a public event and go over, again, just like we did in January, this new study and outlines for what the plan can be based on actual engineering consultants' work. And that study is going to be used, the new feasibility study that was completed in August is going to be the basis of the Connecting Communities study. So that's going to go on for another year, possibly 2 years, before we learn what is, if the Rio Grande Plan is really worth the amount of money that the consultants say it will cost. And our hope is that once the study is done, that the Rio Grande Plan will be in a very good position to be officially adopted as onto the city master plan and to receive state, local, and federal funding for these improvements. But that's all going to have to wait for about another year, possibly 2, as the study is completed. So in the meantime, it's just up to us to keep the momentum going, keep the public involved, and to get the word out that there's a better solution than the solutions that have been proposed. And if you don't mind, I'll take another few minutes to show some trains again. So here's what we had originally pitched for what the train box could look like. You have your freight trains and Amtrak sharing a separate structure than what the transit would be used for. And that's again for transit priority and for rail safety. You can see in the box to the right what the existing satellite photos look like, and what we propose could be on the left. You can see this the kind of disused empty area, the rail yards, the huge freeway overpasses, and have that all replaced with basically a neighborhood. You put the tracks along the 500 West corridor, and you can really open up a lot of space for housing, for offices, for recreation parks. I mean, this is another rendering from Cameron Blakely, and it shows a very built-out residential area. But the sky's the limit to what we can build here. As far as transit goes, the existing condition is in the top right again. We can see Salt Lake Central Station is at the dead end of the original track's blue line. And again, that just doesn't invite a lot of people to come explore the area. But if you move it closer to downtown, we'd be able to put it onto a loop and have trains move continuously through the central station. This was again inspired by Chicago, and an eerie coincidence. This loop formed by the existing and proposed tracks lines is within a couple dozen feet, exactly the same size as the Chicago loop. And of course, this is aspirational. We don't actually expect all these things to be built exactly as we show, but the point is to show the potential for what's there. Inside the depot would look something like this. Potentially, again, this is just what we pitched, where you have the trains separated from the pedestrians, except at the platform level. And through the glass roof, you'd have a beautiful view of the historic train station. And a more engineering view would be this, where you've got, again, the intercity Amtrak trains on the far left in their own structure. I'm showing a mix of high and low platforms. I think high platforms are the future, but we need to have a mix of both for there. The existing north-south commuter line would be in the middle. And then on the east-west, more related to high-speed trains, I have a high platform for a new commuter line that many people have asked for. It's an east-west line that would go through the mountains from a city suburb called Tooele and up through to Park City. And I'm showing a high-speed train there because on these aspirational desire maps of a national high-speed rail network, as aspirational as they almost always show an east-west line connecting through Salt Lake City. And this east-west commuter rail line is an ideal candidate for sharing right-of-way between high-speed trains and commuter trains, because Park City and Salt Lake City, as good of a pair as they are, the engineering challenges of getting across the mountains are significant, and a commuter rail line might not be enough to justify just the construction costs. But if you combine the two, like they are in, say, California with the Caltrain corridor into San Francisco, you have a better shot of funding this. And this is a passion project of a gentleman named Bill Sirico, who is a transit advocate in Park City, who's looking to restore old rail corridors for transit use near Park City. And so this has been a fun collaboration for him and us to gate more publicity. And side note, if you're ever trying to drum up publicity for a transit project or any kind of project in Utah, there's a lot of connections you can make in Park City. The last time I was there presenting this, I met a gentleman who was the former administrator of Federal Transit Administration. I believe that's what it was. And he gave us a lot of pointers on how to present and pitch this plan to policymakers today. And that's been extremely helpful for guiding how we present this message. But more feasible is current proposals. On the left, you see a current study by the State Department of Transportation to have a train line connect Salt Lake City to Las Vegas. And on the right, on the top, you can see another proposal to extend from Salt Lake City up to Boise, Idaho. And these are routes that had been operated in the past. They ceased operation in 1997. Those had been night trains run by Amtrak, departing very late at night, midnight-ish, and they would take about 9 hours to reach the end destinations, and were not very popular. But if we can change that and have these be day trains, operate out of a hub in Salt Lake City rather than being long distance trains traveling from Chicago. I think there's a lot of potential here as well. The cities have grown faster, and there's ways to chop down that operating time from 9 hours to 8, 7, maybe even as low as 6, which might be competitive with automobile traffic, which usually takes about 5.5 hours. I'm showing the Amtrak Aero trains down there. They have the new potential trains for Amtrak operate up to 125 miles per hour. Well, in Utah, we had trains that ran that fast. Historically, at least Union Pacific locomotives were rated up to 120 miles per hour, and there's plenty of examples and documentation of them doing just that. The trouble is we keep our fast trains in museums, but the tracks are still there. The right-of-way is still what it is. And if anything, it's even better today than it was 80 years ago. The potential for improvement and to bringing our trains up to faster speeds is it's right there in front of us. So this is, I guess, kind of a fantasy map, but we're showing trains to Boise and Las Vegas as before, and I've added extra lines to Cheyenne in Wyoming, also to Moab and West Yellowstone to include the national parks, since there are rail lines or former rail lines that go right to the entrances of Arches National Park and Yellowstone National Park. And that would make it, lines of national significance. People could fly to Salt Lake City and then board a fast train and go straight to the national parks, and make it very convenient for people to see, the natural wonders of the country that they live in. And with the Olympics potentially coming in 2034 to Salt Lake City, that's looking more and more certain every time there's news about it. There should just be ways for people to come to Salt Lake City that don't involve long car drives or bus rides or airplane rides. We can be the connection or the hub of a Mountain West rail network. And all this starts at the Rio Grande Depot, which is really just the heart of the matter. If we don't get the heart right, then the rest of the network falls through. So the Rio Grande Plan, we're talking about it as like a major heart transplant, from an old one, from a worn out kind of heart to a brand new one, a strong heart that can really pump a lot of passenger traffic and trains through our city and out to the region around about. And if we get this right, the future is looking extremely bright for rail travel and high-speed trains in Salt Lake City and the region around. So that's our vision, and I think it's time for me to answer some questions.
Oops. Before you take the presentation down,
Okay.
First let me say this is very exciting to think about. But if you could go back towards the beginning, where you had the overhead of the whole area.
Let's just zoom through this way. Of the whole Salt Lake City area or the state?
Slide 9.
Slide 9.
And blow that up again. This to me just makes it look so simple, right? So you described the triangle where there's an Amtrak station on the UP tracks, and there's the FrontRunner station. There's the bus stations. I think there's 2 of them, and then the light rail station. So that's on the left up here. If you go 1 block over, there's a red roof. That's the Rio Grande station. And look how big this road is. And then it widens out by with this kind of boulevard thing here, right next to the station. And then to answer one of the questions that came up, so that's where the tracks would be, and then the downtown essentially starts right where that station is and gets bigger as you go towards the temple. So I just love this picture because it just makes it look like it just makes sense. You just, again, where a train box or a cut and cover tunnel right up this big wide boulevard here makes so much sense. So I wanted to make it clear. Again,
That
thank
was
you.
one of the major selling points, is that the right of way, the infrastructure is mostly still there. It's been preserved. Uh, People make fun of Salt Lake City for its famously wide streets and how it's not very urban, but this would be a chance to take full advantage of the wide streets in the former rail corridor and put them to good use again.
Yeah, and I will say downtown Salt Lake was very vibrant. It's much more vibrant than a lot of Midwestern cities. Uh, it was really a great place to go, and I think there's a really good Indian restaurant that I ate at.
Oh yeah, well, I'm happy I had a good time.
Chris, are there questions that we should deal with?
Yes.
And then
Yes,
if you
there.
can turn off the screen unless there's ones that are particular to the presentation.
Yeah, I guess we can always bring it back if needed. But let's see, I think we got to a few of these. David, one of our technical advisors in Chicago, asked about the location of the depot. Is it on the downtown side of the tracks? I think Rick just spoke to that. Breck asks, will the proposed new station have through tracks north and south?
The answer is yes. So currently, the Salt Lake Central Station is a through station. And even though we were very inspired by Denver Union Station in its redevelopment plans, we recognize that plan, the redevelopment, as good as it is, has one shortcoming in that it was turned into a terminal station. So you have basically 5 tracks that trains have to go in and out of to reach the station. The way we pitched it and the way that the new feasibility study proved is feasible, they both included 6 tracks. So that's 6 tracks going in, 6 tracks going out on the south and then the north side. So it's a total of 12 ways to get in or out of the depot, which means that even though we're showing just the 3 platforms, it still has the potential to be a very high capacity station as trains move through the station.
Thanks. And let's see, Roger, another one of our advisors, asks if you could say more about the timeline of the community building work that you did. What's the span of time this is played out over?
That's right. That's right. Yes, we started collaborating, my friends and I, through the summer of 2020, when we were all working at home and bored out of our minds, and pitching ideas back and forth. I think that's how Cameron had the time to work on those fantastic renderings. And then at the end of 2020, we released, it wasn't this first pamphlet that you can see at our website, but it was the first draft of that. That was about December 2020, and that's when the first Building Salt Lake article was mentioned about the Rio Grande Plan. And that's when we started getting people to reach out back to us. Nick Norris had his first meeting with us in January of 2021. By that March, we had already started talking with the city council. And then 2022 was mostly talking with city planners that the council had arranged for us to speak with about the potential for the plan. And so it's been, it's been quite a few years. It'll be coming up on 3 years that we've been publicly talking about this now. And I guess if I were to consolidate this message into just a few points that would be more applicable to not just Salt Lake, but everywhere, is that these huge projects require a lot of patience. The amount of money that will need to be spent on this project is significant, and it takes a lot of time for people to get comfortable with that to make it seem like this is actually feasible. So you pitch your plan, make it concise, try to include an old depot, something that that was lost, but we can restore. That's helpful. People like that idea, but mostly just keep working at it and bringing it up again and again. I was on the train a few weeks ago with a UTA employee, and he recognized me from my YouTube videos and said, "You're that Rio Grande guy." I'd say, "Yeah, I've been working for about a year to create a YouTube presence." And so he recognized me, and he said, "You know, I have been going to all these public meetings, and at every single one, someone asks me about the Rio Grande Plan." It made me super happy. And so if we can just be patient and keep the message going, just again and again, let the officials know that this is what the public really wants, there's headway that can be made. That's how progress is done.
Great, thanks. And continuing with building support, Philippe asks, how can private sector architecture and engineering firms support this initiative?
Support this specific initiative. We've had some architecture students in the past hold like an architecture competition. This was at Utah Valley University down in Utah County. And for their senior projects, they came up with a bunch of really cool renderings of alternatives to Cameron's design, what the depot could look like and what it would mix in with the surrounding neighborhoods. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to keep those and share them on our website. But if you're able to, incorporate something like this into your master plans, I guess like the University of Utah had looked at the blocks nearby the Rio Grande Depot for redevelopment, and you could tell one of the people working on the architecture plans was a fan of this because he included a bright red call out, Rio Grande Depot potential transit station, that sort of thing. Yeah, just be aware of that. This is a thing that we're trying to pitch and propose. But I guess a better answer would be for architecture firms wanting to get involved. Visualizing things is just such a powerful way to connect with the public. If you want to show what your intentions are, just having a visual, a graphic, some kind of model is extremely helpful. And whatever you can do to present your ideas or the ideas that you love, whether it's the Rio Grande Plan or some other friendship project that you're into, just creating a visual and showing the potential that way is going to get traction.
Great, thanks. And we had, let's see, there are several technical questions. And
all right, that's what I'm better at.
Yeah, there you go. You're an engineer. We have several questions and comments about ventilation, including this one from Barry. What type of ventilation system would be used to expel diesel engines exhaust from the tunnel boxes?
Very good question. One that comes up a lot. In our original pitch, we had shown some very small amounts of ventilation shafts going up through a median in 500 West. And I've always talked about the potential of adding some blowers in there so that when a freight train comes through, that exhaust can be expelled. The Rio Grande trench or train box would be about a mile long, which is a lot shorter than some major tunnels on other freight rail corridors, and they operate just fine with custom ventilation systems. Just every couple 100 feet, some new fans and stuff. The new feasibility study that I mentioned that the city did, they open up the top a lot more in their configuration, so there's a lot more space for ventilation to come out. They're angling pretty obviously for a passive ventilation system where the fumes aren't as enclosed under the ground as what Cameron and I had shown. And I guess, that's more feasible. I can definitely see that being the way that this is built originally. Once it's built, you can reconfigure it eventually to however you like. Our initial renderings were done mostly to show mostly just to get people excited, I guess. We wanted to show that it is technically and engineeringly feasible to put everything there. You don't have to make drawbacks. Like you don't have to have a big, huge hole in the middle of the streets to have diesel come out. You can spend a little bit more on ventilation fans and those sort of things to keep your street on top. We wanted to show that there's a pretty good connection at the central station now between commuter trains and light rail, and so we kept it that way despite some other things. Anyway, yeah, we wanted to show that that you don't need to accept trade-offs here, that you really can keep the existing conditions the way it is. Whether that's how it's going to be built or not, according to our publicity renderings, is another question. Yeah, don't take it too literally, but there are ways we can make that work too.
Okay. And thank you. And in answering that question, you mentioned the recent report again, and we actually had a question. Is there a link for the August 2023 consultant report?
Very good question. Not at the moment. We're going to have a group huddle on this. Us originators and supporters of the Rio Grande Plan. We're going to try and release this on our terms. There's some changes that have been made to the way that the plan looks and operates, and we'd like to get ahead of that. We're hoping that we can have a same kind of similar public event like we did in January, with news crews, with politicians present, and direct the narrative of this is what changed and this is why that's a good change. We would rather not have this just kind of released online and let the most negative stories lead. So yeah, it's just a little bit of publicity. We're hoping to do that sometime next month, or at least before the end of the year, at which point we definitely will link to as much of that as we're allowed to by the city.
Okay, thanks. And then from ventilation to water, Breck asks, will water table issues require pumping?
Yes.
There you go, easy one.
Well, yeah, I can add a little bit more in that the 500 West corridor goes right past a new shopping mall. It's called the Gateway. It's what became of the old Union Pacific freight yards. They built these huge parking garages underneath the shopping mall. Those go down about 3 levels deep under the ground. And we've talked with the owners of those shopping centers, Boyer, and the managers there, about what solutions they have to keep those parking levels dry, because they go down far deeper than what the Rio Grande Plan is proposing. And they've let it be known to us that yeah, pumping is needed, but it's also not a really big issue. It's been done. It's been done literally a dozen feet from where we're proposing the train box go. So when I say yes, we'll take pumping. That's not a very difficult requirement to match.
Okay. And then you just mentioned the Union Pacific, and we had a couple of questions about the UP. Roger asks, could you move the UP out of the train box?
It's a very feasible solution of having just the transit lines go to the Rio Grande Depot. The issue with doing that is that the way we've presented the plan already is the elimination of railroad crossings through downtown. And so while, the way I approach this is that it's a transit improvement project and people are going to get super excited about better trains, right? If we're looking at just from the train point of view, it makes a lot of sense just to have the transit move to the Rio Grande Depot and keep the freight trains separate. But that's not what's got a lot of the public excited about this. They really want those freight trains gone. And so I think if we were to separate the two into 2 different projects or 2 different issues, we'd lose a lot of support.
And then another UP question. David asks, what is the UP's general attitude toward this?
It's hard to tell what their attitude is because they don't really say that much publicly. So everything I've got, it's been through 2 or 3 people, passed along the telephone line. It went from being, outright, rejection of no, we don't do that. That's dangerous for our train crews and stuff, to more and more acceptance of, well, maybe we could have a look at it, to eventually cooperating with the most recent Salt Lake City study on what they would need. I think they're asking for a little bit too much in what the consultants gave to them. But from the railroad's point of view, you always begin into bargaining and negotiation the way that is, for the price. So they are at the moment, I think, pretty cooperative with this idea. The idea that I would like to express to Union Pacific, if anyone from UP is listening, is that eliminating railroad crossings is in the freight railroad's interest too. And if Salt Lake City can create a corridor for freight trains to operate without interfering with pedestrians, it would be operationally advantageous too. There's all these news stories, every couple months that come out about school children on their way home from school, and they have to negotiate past these parked freight trains, and they climb through the hopper cars and stuff like it's some kind of, you know, third world country, I guess. But it's downtown. It's in one of the more prosperous areas of the state, where you know, little kids have to scramble across freight trains, and that's you know, it makes everyone unhappy. Both the freight crews, the safety operation people there, and the people who have to be blocked by these trains. So yeah, there's a lot of advantages to joining up and becoming part of a coalition to make this plan happen.
We've got more questions than time, but hopefully we can get a couple more in.
Sorry, I'll answer more quickly now.
That's okay. Fred asks, can you include space for future expanded service in the train box so it's not out of capacity as future service increases?
Very good. Yeah. We showed the train box be the full width of the wide roads. It's about 124 feet wide. And we expect to have space for about 6 tracks. Like I said, Union Pacific has 2 tracks to the area. The UTA has 2 tracks for FrontRunner, the commuter rail line. We showed 6 to have 2 additional transit tracks. That's the east-west corridor, the potential high-speed rail I talked about. That's about as much as we think we could fit in the present right-of-way. But still, being a through station and able to move a lot of trains through, I think would be able to handle a lot of capacity that way. Yeah, I don't expect the Rio Grande station to be capacity constrained for a very long time.
Okay. We had several questions about electrification, including this one just came in from Stephanie asking essentially, does the plan allow overhead clearance for eventual mainline electrification?
Yes. We had pitched a train box idea with the ground floor about 33 feet deep. The newest proposal is about 40 feet. That would allow enough space for electrification on the commuter rail lines, and probably also for the freight lines. We want to have enough space for double stack containers, which are about 21 feet tall, and still have space for wires or at least a electric catenary bar. And that depends on what kind of structure is selected for the roof as well. But yes, electrification is on everyone's horizon. Salt Lake City has occasional moments where its air quality gets pretty horrendous. All the air is blocked in by the mountains, and so we kind of sit in our own pollution for up to weeks at a time. So electrification for at least the commuter trains and potentially for the freight trains is a hot topic on everyone's mind here, and it's something that we wouldn't ignore.
Okay, thank you. And then alongside praise for your presentation, Frederick asks, what can people outside of Utah do to help make this project a reality?
The most successful thing we've done so far is just get people talking about it. If there can be more highlights like what you've done with the High Speed Rail Alliance. Thank you so much for having us on. Just bring attention to this issue so that it seems more plausible, seems almost more inevitable that some kind of improvement be made. That puts more pressure on the planners and decision makers to really take this seriously. We aren't a formal organization. We don't accept donations or anything like that yet, because so far the city and planners have been extremely receptive to us. And thanks to them one more time for taking this issue so seriously. But yeah, the more talk that's done about the plan, especially to planners, decision makers, policy makers, the more attention this gets, the more plausible and feasible it becomes.
Well, amen to that. And thank you, Christian. And Rick, any, I think we'll have to end there for questions, but Rick, any concluding thoughts?
Yes. Again, this is great, and hopefully it will continue to move forward at an accelerated pace. It illustrates once again why we need a national rail program, because this is bigger than just the state of Utah. And the ability to do stuff like this across the country depends upon a much bigger federal funding stream. But I want to point out, you had said you don't take donations, but for those who are listening today, we do take donations. Highspeedrail.us is our website. Hit the donate button, and we can continue to bring you more exciting programs like this. And if somebody wanted to make a restricted gift specifically for creating an action center around this program, we'd be more than happy to accept that. So highspeedrail.us again, hit the donate button. And thank you so much for this great presentation. I'm glad that glad we were able to connect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, everyone.